Hello everyone, welcome to lesson 4 of your geography lessons on YouTube. We're looking at globalisation in India today, following on from last week's lesson. So we looked at globalisation, what globalisation is in last week's lesson, and we're looking at how it links to India today, especially in relation to India's economy and looking at how globalisation affects the people of India and employment and things like that in particular. Okay, so looking at our lesson objectives, we are going to have a look at what outsourcing means and why MNCs do it, because you might remember those key terms from last lesson. Outsourcing and MNCs, I've got them in bold and underlined there. So you might want to think about what those words mean if you can't remember. We're going to have a look at the impacts of outsourcing on businesses and people. So in particular, the businesses they affect either themselves or in the country they outsource to. And we're going to have a look at evaluating the impact of globalisation on India. Okay, so what impacts does it have on people, on businesses and things like that? Okay, so this is lesson 4. So our first task is going to be kind of a recap and thinking back over the last few lessons that we've done, just to keep all that information fresh in our minds. So task 1, I want you to answer the following short answer questions for me. So 1 to 6, we've got describe the location of India in the world. Okay, so I'll put in brackets things that I want you to include. So hemisphere, continent, and some compass directions. So tell me where it is in relation to other countries using compass directions. Question 2, name 3 tourist attractions in India, which you would have got from your India project. The first thing we had to do, the first piece of work we had to do. Question 3, what is the heavy rainfall where they get every year called? So that season of heavy rainfall that they get every year, that was lesson 2. So think about what we call that. Question 4, what does diversity mean? Okay, only 2 lessons ago, so that one should be pretty fresh in your minds. What makes India diverse? So how does India be diverse, or how is India diverse? And what is globalization? So last lesson, think about what globalization is. Okay, so answer 1 to 6 for me. You can pause here and complete those for me. Okay, moving on, you press play again. So task 2, again, we're recapping, we're thinking. Think back to last lesson on globalisation and answer the following questions, okay? So these 2 key terms that might link to them that I've said at the first, outsourcing, MNCs. Why do you think UK call centres locate in India? Okay, so think about it. No right or wrong answer. I just want you thinking about it in the first place. Why do you think UK call centres would locate in India? And 2, how does this link to globalisation? So think about UK call centres in India. Why would they do that? And how does that link to the idea of globalisation? The idea that the world is getting smaller, that idea that things are moving around the world a lot quicker. How does it link to that? Okay, so they might require a little bit more thought, a little bit of a longer answer than the last task, but give them a bit of thought, pause the video here and answer those 2 for me as well. Okay, moving on to the next one, you must press play again. So we're looking at outsourcing in India, so things that have been outsourced to India. Okay, I figured out how to use the little laser pointer, which I'm thinking is very handy for me. So things that have been outsourced to India, I've just circled that word there, outsourcing. So I'm going to read what's in the box here. Many things have been outsourced to India in the past, as it makes production and employment costs much cheaper for companies, as they do not have to pay their staff as much as if they would if their factories were in higher income countries. Okay, so normally when these companies outsource, so they get another country or people in another country to provide their products or services, it's not as expensive as it would be if they were to do it in their own country. So for example, Nike, if Nike were to make their trainers in the UK or in the USA, it would cost them a lot more, because in the UK and in the USA they've got employment laws that mean their employees have to be paid a certain amount, they have to have certain hours that they can work and things like that. Whereas in these lower income countries, they don't have those kind of laws. It's much cheaper to pay their employees. It's much cheaper to get the materials to make the shoes and things like that. So generally, they always do it in a lower income country, because it means it's lower costs on producing these things, and then they get higher profit because they still sell them for the same amount of money. So they would normally outsource to a lower income country as opposed to the high income countries. Then they'll have things like their HQs, their head offices in the higher income countries, where you've got a lot of high skilled people, highly educated people that will be able to run those kind of offices. So things in the UK that have been outsourced include food production, which we've got down here, call centres, which we've got up here, and clothing production, which we've got down here. So all of those things have been outsourced to India, and they get, once they've been made, or once those services have been provided, they get shipped to the UK, or when it comes to call centres, those calls get redirected to the UK. So things like that have been outsourced to India, and that's what that means. Okay, so next slide. Outsourcing. So we're looking at call centres to India. So as we said in the last lesson, it's cheaper for big MNCs to get their work done by other people in other countries. Okay, where it's cheaper to employ people, there we go, cheaper to employ people, that is very important, and it's cheaper for them to build offices or factories, very, very important. Here we have an example of a call centre in India. Large corporations will locate their helplines and customer services in call centres in India to bring down costs. So this is what your typical call centre in India will look like. Okay, a lot of people packed into a very tiny space, lots of computers, lots of voices, very loud, not a very pleasant place to work, I have to admit. I have worked in a call centre myself. It's not a great thing. Obviously it wasn't in India, it was in the UK, but it isn't a nice environment to be in. You've got a lot of noise going on, a lot of like phones ringing, clicking, typing, those kind of noises. Very, very crowded, not a nice place to work, as you can see from the picture. So sometimes if you ring a business in the UK, you think you're ringing to the UK, you're actually speaking to someone in India. Okay, so maybe if you ring a bank, or if you ring customer services for something, that call might actually be being answered by someone in India. And if you think about it, the time difference that it would be, say if you were calling in the afternoon here, it would be maybe the middle of the night in India. So they have really weird working hours because they have to be open when the UK times would be, so they can work through the night and things like that. Really not the best conditions. So that's what a call centre in India would look like. Okay, so what I've got down here is a link to a video which is about call centres in India, about employees in call centres in India, and kind of the processes that they go through to get into that job and what that job involves. So this link I've got down here, I will actually put in the description of the video on YouTube. So just click on it from the description and you can watch that video. Just watch it up to 4 minutes. That's all you need, because it is a very long video, but you just need to watch up to 4 minutes. While you're watching it, I want you to answer these questions at the side here. So we've got 4 questions related to the video. They're in order of the video playing, so you don't have to skip back and forth. And I just want you to answer those. Just go. It might take 2 watches, 3 watches. That's fine, but just make sure you only watch up to 4 minutes, because otherwise I haven't got any questions for it. I mean, if you're generally interested in it, you can watch the whole thing. That's fine by me. But for this task, you only need the first 4 minutes. So the questions are: where are the people calling from in the first few seconds, and where do the calls go to? Okay, so there's a little bit of a intro bit to the video, and there's lots of different people calling from different places. I want you to name those places and where do those calls go to. What have Indians who work in call centres done to be able to deal with customers on the phone? Okay, so there's a bit of a clip about their training and things like that. What have they gone through to be able to deal with the customers on the phone? Question 3 is: why do you think the woman is teaching them about what people do in Australia? Okay, so there's a clip about a woman teaching them about Australian culture and what they do in Australia. Why do you think she might be doing that? And then question 4, name 2 positive things about call centres locating in New Delhi just after 3 minutes in. Okay, so they do say a lot of positive things about the employees that they employ in these call centres in New Delhi, and that's just after 3 minutes. Can you name 2 of them for me when you're answering those questions? Okay, so pause the video here, get that link up for me, and answer questions 1 to 4. Okay, right, you must press play again. So we're moving on to task 4. This here is a extract from someone who worked in an Indian call centre in the summer. Just to kind of find out what it was like and experience that themselves. This person was from the UK, okay, and they went over to India for a summer. They worked in a call centre for the summer and did some research and wrote some accounts about it. So this is kind of like a diary entry, an account of someone who worked in a call centre. What I want you to do is read through it for me and answer the questions once you've read it. So we've got questions 1 to 5 here. I just want you to read them with me now, and then once you've read through the passage, just answer those for me. So what is the first job they will be asked to do is question 1. Question 2, what are they doing instead of using their university education? Question 3, how much will they earn per hour? Question 4, why do they change their names? And question 5, what were career prospects like in India 20 years ago? Okay, so some pretty straightforward questions, but you just need to read through the passage to answer them. Okay, so pause the video here and task 4, questions 1 to 5 for me. Okay, moving. We are on task 5. It's task after task today, guys. I'm very sorry. But we have got some positives and negatives of outsourcing. Okay, so we're looking at HSBC here. So moving away and looking at an example in particular. So we've got HSBC and their call centres. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, HSBC is a pretty big bank. It's Europe's biggest bank, but they also have branches all around the world, and they employ people all around the world as well. So at the top of the page here, you've got some information about HSBC and what they're doing and the scenario, kind of what's happening. Then down here we've got David. This is David here. David and his situation. So he's been working for HSBC for quite a while, but HSBC have recently announced that they are moving their call centre to India. Okay, and then when you come over here, you've got Anka. Okay, so Anka is also a graduate and he lives in New Delhi. He is currently working for Amazon, but he will be working for HSBC when their call centre moves to India. So what I want you to do is read through each person's story and HSBC's story, and then copy out this table down here. So we've got this table of pros and cons for each person. So look at HSBC, think about the pros that would be for them and the cons that moving to India would have on them. So if we read through a little bit now, we can maybe do the first one together. So HSBC, the pros. So we've got HSBC is Europe's biggest bank with pre-tax profits of 19 billion US dollars, which is 11.8 billion pounds in 2010, more than double the 7.1 billion figure for 2009. Okay, so they are making money all the time. HSBC want to increase their profits in a difficult economic climate. Okay, so when the economy is not doing as well as it maybe should be or could be, HSBC want to be making more profit. They want to cut staffing costs. Okay, part of this will be closing some local HSBC branches and promoting the use of online banking. Okay, so they'll want to move away from maybe employing people in buildings on the high street, and then hoping that people will start using online banking instead. And they will relocate 3 of their UK-based call centres to New Delhi to cut wages and rent costs. Okay, so by closing their UK call centres and moving to New Delhi, they will cut down their rent costs, because those massive call centre offices will probably cost a lot of money to rent, and then they'll cut their wages as well, because in New Delhi they don't have the same laws that we have in the UK in terms of like minimum wages and things like that. So they'll be paying people in the UK a lot more than they would be if they were in New Delhi. So we've got pros for HSBC. It'll be increasing their profits. Okay. By cutting wages and rent costs and things like that. So that would be a pro. There necessarily actually isn't any cons there. So you can, if there isn't any of one of them, you can just leave it blank. So we've got pros, but we have not got cons. Okay, so write out the pros for me, and then you can just leave the cons blank. Okay, and do that for each person. So then you read through David and Anka's situation as well, and fill out that table. Okay, on your Word documents, PowerPoints, or sheets of paper, whatever you're doing it on. So pause the video here and fill out that table and complete that for me. Okay, moving on again. Task 6, this is the last one, I promise. So I want you to think about, is outsourcing good or bad for India overall? So read through each of the blue boxes and think about what you have learned in this lesson and make a decision. Is outsourcing good for India or not? Okay, so I want you to write this answer in kind of paragraph style. It's a bit of a longer answer question, and I want you to write the question, like some kind of evaluation to that question. So is it good for India? Is it bad? So you can write the good things and the bad things in 2 separate paragraphs. Write me a longer answer. The information you need will be anything you've got from this lesson and what's in the blue boxes here. You can even use stuff from previous lessons as well. So in the top corner here, we've got a chart that shows India's GDP growth. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, and it means how much kind of the Indian economy, how much India earned as a country, how much it grew from 1950 to 2010. Okay, So over time we can see that has dramatically increased up on an upwards curve like that, especially since 2000. So 2000 is about here, and it's just gone steeply upwards since. Okay, so how could that be a good or a bad thing in terms of outsourcing in India? We've got unemployment rates in India have decreased massively. Okay, so people who are unemployed, that number has gone way down. There's more people employed in India. And working conditions in Indian call centres. Okay, so that might be a good, it might be a bad thing. Have a look at what you'd think working here would be like. Kind of think about sitting at that desk, what sounds you'd be hearing if you were sitting there, what kind of job you'd be doing if you were sitting there. Is that a good or a bad thing? Okay, so think about all the things we've talked about over the lesson and decide if it's a good or a bad thing. You can reference call centres, or you can reference different other ones as well if you want to do your own research, that's fine. I have also included some sentence starters down here if anyone wants to use them to help structure their paragraphs. So I think outsourcing is good for India because, you can give me your reason, outsourcing provides, that could be something like outsourcing provides jobs for Indians who maybe necessarily wouldn't have a job before the company located there. And then you've got, I think outsourcing is bad for India because this means, another reason outsourcing is bad because this means. And just explain your answers for me. Maybe round it off with a conclusion. So overall, I think outsourcing is good, or overall I think outsourcing is bad for India because maybe the pros outweigh the cons, or the cons outweigh the pros, things like that. Okay, or something like, as much as it provides employment, the employment is poorly paid and the conditions are poor, and things like that. Okay, so that could be something you'd write. So task 6, last task, you can pause here and start answering those questions for me. Okay, last bit. So this one's a bit more fun. If you call it fun, I'd call it fun. Find a picture on Google or draw 2 outline maps. So we've got an outline map of the UK and an outline map of India. Okay. What I want you to do with each one is write down the advantages and disadvantages of UK call centres locating in India on your country outlines. Okay, so for example, I've got locating call centres in India is much cheaper for UK companies. Okay, so that would be one that you could put on the UK map. Okay, say for instance you had a disadvantage, you could put something like this on India. You could put UK call centres locate in India but pay their staff poorly. That could be a disadvantage. If you want to, you can write your advantages and disadvantages in different colours, because that would make it clearer for which ones are advantages and disadvantages. If not, you can always just put advantage before what you've written. So you could write advantage, locating call centres in India is much cheaper for UK companies. And just make sure you make it clear which one's an advantage and which one's a disadvantage. Okay, and then make sure you match each one to which country it relates to. Okay, use your lessons from the notes from the lesson to help you, use your own thoughts to help you, and aim to have at least one of each for each country. So one advantage and one disadvantage for each. Okay, so think about that for me, and that is your last task for today. Okay, so as soon as you finish that, make sure to save your Word documents and save your PowerPoints, submit them on Teams or email them to me. And then you are done this week's geography lesson. Make sure we do the quiz as well after you've finished. The link will be on ePraise and on Teams. Yeah, that's everything. Okay, all right, thank you very much, guys. Have a lovely week, and I will talk to you again next week.